No, definitely not. We are live with Steve DeVoe. Steve, I was just saying, you're a man of many talents. Mm-hmm. You can talk sports. You can talk commercial leases. Mm-hmm. You said you could talk about Bitcoin. That just naturally excites me.
Yeah.
You're going to talk about what was the other thing? I already just forgot.
Kids. And,
your journey into Canada.
Journey into Canada. Sure.
We're going to cover all of these things, but okay. I need to ask, what's with the hockey shirt? What's going on?
Yeah. So my girls were all big time athletes, all hockey players as well, which in itself is kind of an interesting thing, because when I had all girls, I thought, oh my God, my sporting days are over now, right? I'm going to be a dance class and I'll be an art class or whatever. And sure enough, for whatever reason, they kind of went down that path. The oldest one went first, and then of course the middle one was not to be outdone, so she followed, and then the third one was like no brainer. She was in, and so they all played up through AA here in Canada, and then my middle one was really focused on it. I mean, she just lived, eat, and breathed hockey, right? And she was, a smart kid too, so she had good hockey IQ. Anyway, she went down to the U.S. and played, and then she went off to Europe, and she played for a year in Salzburg, Austria. And now
how cool is that?
Yeah, super cool. My wife Joanne and I went over and watched her play in November. Yeah, in January, and oh man, it was really something, and then now she's actually down in she just went there last week. She's pursuing her doctorate in athletic training at the University of Florida, Gainesville, the Gators.
Oh, wow, yes.
And they offered her a full thing. We'll pay for everything. So she deferred it a year to go play. And then when she went back to them, because they offered her another contract in Europe, she said, no, I don't think so, because the school said we will defer a year, but we can't really do it again, right? So anyway, this is Cortland is where she played in the U.S., so I've got tons of Cortland paraphernalia. And I told her, I said, now I expect to get a room full of Gator.
So are you involved in any way now anymore? Probably not.
Not directly. I mean, I watch we saw every game, or virtually every game in Europe. They streamed them, yeah. So, I mean, we almost, like all hockey parents, so we talked almost every game. And actually, I got to know her coach. It was a female coach, very nice. And, she got to open up, and we would talk about different things, defense, or, how are we going to take the team they had was very young, and it was not that great. Lots of skill, but lots of inexperience. So, but yeah, no, today my role is more just, hey, Dad, what do you think about that? Or what should we do here? Or what do you think? That kind of thing. That's, I think, all parents at this stage. Whatever you've given them. Now you're just either a support or a safety net, one of the other, I think, right? But I'm sure, like you, our whole goal is just to be as an active participant in whatever they're doing as we possibly can be, and still leave them to do what they got to do. So that's.
Hold these instead of banging the table when you speak.
Oh, sorry.
No. Play. If you need to play with something, play with those. There you go.
Okay.
There you go. Time flies.
Yeah.
And then, so you're American guy. Where were you born in the U.S.?
I was born in upstate New York, over a little tiny rural community called Windsor, New York, which is... most people wouldn't know this, but it's right on the edge of the Catskill Mountains. It's probably an hour and a half south of Syracuse.
Okay.
Maybe 3 hours north of the city.
And how the heck did you end up here again?
That is a real story. I mean, my degrees are in marine biology and chemistry, and I was working at, I'll give you the Coles Notes version. I was working at a place called Moat Marine Laboratory in Sarasota, Florida. We were doing cancer research on sharks. And the guy that I was working for was a PhD, and he was making virtually no money at all. Like, he was living grant to grant, had wife, couple of kids. And as I got more and more involved in that business, I got disenchanted with it. I love the outdoors. I love the marine part of it, but it quickly became obvious that it was going to be a challenge to get monetarily where I kind of wanted to be at the time. When you're young and foolish, all you want is Ferraris and freedom, yeah, those kind of things, right? So I was actually going back to school, and I ended up working through a totally unrelated thing. I ended up, again, this is a long story, I'll give you the Coles Notes version, working as a captain for 3 years on a private guy's boat. He was an avid diver. I was a big-time diver. All he wanted to do was wreck dive up and down the East Coast. So he sent me away to captain school, and I got my papers, and I spent 3 years just doing nothing but diving up and down the East Coast with this guy. But I finally got tired of that, and I went into the yacht brokerage business for a short stint. And I sold a boat to a guy whose name is Chuck Wisher. I can remember him now. He was the Eastern Regional Medal for Coldwell Banker back in the day when Coldwell Banker was a commercial group. And he had bought a big boat. He couldn't handle it. He hired me for a couple of weekends to help him learn to maneuver it and do some things with it. And we chatted a lot. And I told him I didn't like South Florida. I was living down there at that point. I just didn't like anything about what I was doing. Well, South Florida is a lot different today, or then, than it was today. There was a lot of unrest in South Miami area. There was a big Cuban population coming in, and they were conflicting with all kinds of groups down there. And the other thing too is, as I look back on it, one thing in Florida at that time, there was virtually no middle class. So you either were wealthy and you were out on the water, or you were in the service industry and you lived inland. You know what I mean? So you were either gardener
serving
or
the wealthy.
Exactly right. You're a hotel cleaner, you're a car guy, you're a whatever. But there wasn't a lot of head offices. There wasn't a lot of what I would call middle class type business there. It was one or the other. That was one of the problems. And anyway, I wanted out. And one day we're out literally in the Bahamas, and he's telling me, hey, I heard that we're opening up a new office in Toronto. He said the chairman of Royal LePage, Evan White, is leaving the company, taking a couple execs with him. They're going to open up a Canadian branch of Coldwell Banker. And this was back in, I think, 86, or maybe even 85. I can't remember, 85, 86. So anyway, it only took that one thing. I said, can you make a call for me? Like, can you make it? And he said, sure. And I literally, like the Beverly Hillbillies, I packed everything I had in a whatever I was driving at that time.
I guess if you're from upstate New York, it wasn't
a huge reach. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, it was more, the reach was more going from literally living for the last 5 years in shorts and a t-shirt to going to a totally IBM, dark suit, white shirt, striped tie type of thing, right? But the interesting thing, when I talk to people about it, when they ask me, is I think it just was a good example, and I tell my kids of tenacity, because when I came up, you can imagine, I went into the interview with Evan, and he goes, let me get this straight. You've never been to Canada before, or at least not here. You don't live here. You have no experience in real estate. You were a captain before that, and you have a marine biology degree, and you want to get into commercial real estate here? He goes, first of all, they laughed, and they said, no, that's not going to work. So, like at all good, sales guys, I said, okay, well, I got to hear no more than once, because I read it in a book someplace. And so I literally, kind of a funny story on a side note, I just drove up here. I didn't know where to go. I just started driving up highways, and I ended up at Jane and Finch. And I turned on Jane, and I went down the road. I saw a basement apartment for rent, and I rented it. For that,
after being told you're not going to get the job?
No, this was before.
Okay.
Before I went there.
Okay.
But just to add to that story, so the guy said, "Where are you living?" I said, "I'm living at Jane and Finch." He goes, "What?"
Holy shit!
And Tom, literally almost every day, I would show up down at the office down in Toronto, and I would just sit in the lobby, and I'd wave to them. It got a bit of a joke after a while, and I just kept going, and I'd say, well, any chance now? Nope. They would laugh. Nope. Sometimes Evan, Don Fitzpatrick, they'd just walk in and out right by me. I'd sit there for an hour or two, then I'd go do something else. And, after like a month or so, my mom and dad were backstopping me, but I said, I'm not giving up. And I think I went, I don't know, till after Christmas. I was there probably going in the beginning, maybe in September, October, and I was into January, and I was still going, like literally 2 or 3 times a week, 4 times a week.
And sitting in their lobby.
Yep.
And their lobby was in an office building?
It was at King Street. I think it was 2 King.
Was it on the ground floor?
No, it was.
So you would have to go up the elevator?
Yeah, up the elevator.
And then you would get out of the elevator and sit in their lobby?
Correct. They knew what I was there for, or whatever else. And then literally, I think...
And you did this 2 to 3 times a week for months?
For months, yeah.
How long did you sit in the lobby for? All day?
No, I wouldn't sit there. I would just sit there till I saw somebody walk by that knew me to acknowledge. Like if Evan walked by me in the first 10 minutes, I'd only stay there for, an hour or whatever, or 15, 20 minutes or whatever. But if I didn't see either of those guys or somebody who knew me, I sat there till one of them acknowledged that I was there, right? And
so what's the tipping point?
So February, Evan calls me into his office. He goes, anybody who will do that, tenacious, could maybe make it in this business, even though you have no qualifications, no nothing, right? And so he said, I want you to take whatever they had there, their personality profile test or whatever. And I did real well on it. I mean, my math and science scores were obviously good, and I could communicate, which was good. And so they said, they had the downtown office. They were going to open up an office in the West End over near the airport. And the guy who opened it, his name was Ramsey Loonan. And he said, if you can go convince Ramsey that he should hire you, he said, you're on your, have at it. And he said, but you have to get your papers at the time. So I had already applied to get the papers way back then because I wasn't giving up no matter what. He said, even if I get them and I don't use them, but I didn't want that to be an excuse. So I went to see Ramsey.
You had status in Canada to do this?
No, I was just here.
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
Yeah. And as soon as I got hired, then I started switching. Like I got a Canadian driver's license and those kind of things, right? And I actually my car was leased. I had to take it back to the U.S., which makes me kind of laugh. But anyway, so Ramsey said,
he was into it.
He said, if you're that tenacious, I'm interested to see what happens. But he said, I got to tell you right up front, it's 100% eat what you kill.
So there's no base salary.
No base salary.
Wow, commercial deals are long.
Oh, they are long. And I didn't know anything. Like I'd never even seen a lease. I knew nothing about commercial real estate other than I started reading as much as I could, right? And they said, there's your cube. There's a phone. I think there was 5 other sales guys, a secretary and the manager at that time. And and so I sat at that cube, and I was really lucky. One of my best friends now was a young guy out of Western, Scott McKenzie, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I said, well, what do you think? He said, well, get some leases and start reading them so you know what you're talking about. Get out and see if they'll assign you a territory, and then learn everything you could possibly learn about that territory, And then once you have all that, then start calling, right? And seeing if you could put 2 and 2 together. And I think within about 4 months, I did my first deal. It was a 1-year lease to a small business up on Carrier Drive. I think I made $43 on that first deal.
And did you find them, or they cold called in?
I think I don't even remember. I'm guessing I cold called them. At that time, maybe I door knocked them. I don't really know, but. I was good at making it sound like I knew what I was talking about, even though I didn't. I spent a lot of time going, okay, let me get back to you on that one. And then I'd run back to the office and ask somebody else.
Well, that's how it's done.
That's how it's done.
You followed up.
And, but having said that, after that, I mean, I was the youngest vice president, or the earliest vice president they had once I got going. And I think I was one guy short of Rookie of the Year that very year. And the only reason I got beat is because the guy who won it came in from another company. He'd already been working for 4 or 5 years, but by our qualifications, he was a rookie to us, right? So
$43 in the 80s, that was like $8 million.
Like $8 million now. Yeah, that kept me going for like about a week. My mom and dad were backstopping me by that point. So
what did your parents say?
They hated it. Yeah. Well, because they had just spent a fair bit of time and effort getting me through a good education in the sciences. And now I had told them I was going to go into sales, right? Which, again, they couldn't register. A guy spent his whole life outdoors is now going to go sit behind a desk, which was
that's a pretty hard transition.
It was a tough transition for me. And I can always remember one of my dad's great lines when he said, "You're not going to be Herb Tarlick, are you? Do you know who Herb Tarlick is?" Yeah. I go, I'll try not to be. But anyway, so and then I got, and then you get settled in, and I got a wife and I got kids, and 40 years later, I'm still here, right? So
wild that you started renting at Jane and Finch, because like the office was downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
And so you just started randomly driving. Like Jane and Finch is kind of quite a bit further north than downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
So I just started going till you could afford a place?
Well, first of all, there was a couple things. I mean, one thing is I've never been a real downtown guy. And so 2 things. One thing I thought downtown.
And I guess Jane and Finch in the 80s was not, it maybe was clearly outside of the city core. So maybe you were just like, you felt better. It was like not downtown.
Yeah. So Two things. One thing is I thought it would be expensive downtown, and I didn't relish the idea of living downtown, like underground parking. I had a car and all those types of things. And I literally just went up the 427. I was going along the 400, and I saw a big sign that said for rent up this way on a building. And the very first exit was Finch, and that's where the building was. Well, I saw the building. I didn't like it, but then I saw something else, and it turned out to be a basement apartment there. And
yeah, good for you.
And
I mean,
I
it's
just
just
said,
a testament to
done.
just getting shit done.
Well, I just wanted to get settled, right? And I wanted to tell them that too. I didn't want to tell them that, hey, I'm here for an interview, but I got no roots. I got no nothing. I wanted them to know that I was committed enough to go find a place. And
do you remember how long the lease was you signed, or did you even sign a lease?
I don't think I ever signed a lease. Yeah. No, I was just a kind of month to month. And then, within a few months, I realized that was maybe not the best area. And then I moved over to Kipling and Albion, which I'm not really sure was that much better, but it was a straight shot down the 427 to the airport. So it was a quick and easy for me to get to work. And in those days I was spending too much time at work, but what were
your hours?
Oh my God, I can't even, I put in 60 plus. I didn't have anything else to do, Tom, either. You know what I mean? I hadn't developed a real big social core at that point or whatever else. So, I was first in the office and a lot of times last out. Now, was I struggling or was I smoking work all that time? Probably not. But I had long days for sure back then. And lots of Saturdays and Sundays too. I just go driving, right? Because I didn't know anything. I just go driving around and writing down buildings that looked like they had extra land, or buildings that had for lease signs on them, or new businesses, I could see the location of or whatever. And that's how it got.
And now you have years of experience and multiple books. Is it multiple books?
Yeah. So I wrote the book that you guys wrote, or that you wrote the acknowledgement for, which was great, by the way, and it did quite well. And but as I
give everyone the title.
Well, the new, I'll give them the new title now, because it's called Better Investment Decisions. It's basically that same older book, but I brought it in from, whenever we did that 15 years ago or 17 years ago. I took it. It had lots of great stories and everything else, but it needed some updating. So I basically updated it. I had some new techie equipment that I thought young guys in analysis would like to know about, and just kind of brought it back up to speed a little bit. And it's called Better Investment Decisions.
What do you cover in the book?
Well, its really big focus is due diligence process. I mean, you probably remember when I did it the first time, it all started with a lawyer, and I was selling an investment product, and he said, "I've never seen a due diligence package better than this." He goes, "You should package this up," right? And I got the idea then. I said, well, and I could see it too in my own scope of work, that guys were not looking at properties as efficiently and as quickly and as thoroughly as they should be for an investment person, which is one reason I always accused of the market going so crazy, because people they went nuts and they would just accept anything, whether they'd actually done any due diligence on or not. They just wanted to get in so bad, they would just close an eye, right? But anyway, it's a real kind of in-depth due diligence process.
For what types of property?
Mostly apartments, and the things that we kind of messed out when I was here, those types of things. But it really gave you everything from a drive-by, hey, yes or no, moving stuff off the list, to a quick walkthrough, to really digging into the meat of it in all different stages: how to collect it, how to organize it, how to go through it, what you can live with, what you can't live without. And just basically getting it right up to the point where now you're making an offer. That's really what that book was about. And it did real well. I think I told you, I got a nice little notice, a little plaque a while back. It took 5 or 6 years, but I think it sold like 5,000 copies or something like
awesome.
that. And so I thought I would redo it. And then since then I've done I think you and I've talked about this, I became, in my mind, kind of a professional parent almost. I just love parenting, right? And all the things that go along with it. And so I've got a book out now on Amazon called Raising Outdoor Kids, because in our neighborhood, so many people are always saying to me, and Joanne as well, is like, how do you do it? Like, how do you get your kids out and doing the things that they do? Because there's so many basement dwellers and, screen time, they just can't get away, and so on and so forth. And so I said, Joe, I think I'd like to tackle that. So I spent some time doing some research and looking around, but mostly my own experiences bringing up 3 kids that all turned out to be outdoor kids, right? And anyway, so that's out there, and I've got one coming out again in about, I'd say maybe 3 weeks. It's all done. It's just going through the formatting, whatever that, and that's A Teenager's Guide to Life, and it's kind of all the things as a parent, particularly me, that I wish I would have taught my kids when they were teenagers that I didn't. You know, everything from, you know, how to deal with your peer group at a party, maybe so you avoid being in bad situations, or how to change the oil in your car, or how to make healthy foods instead of crap, and those kind of things, you know. And
so you enjoy this process to do another book?
I do.
Especially
I do. I've got that one. I got another one coming right behind it, again, survival skills for teens. And I really enjoy that.
So now that your kids are not teenagers anymore, you're holding on, Steve. You're right.
Yeah, you're right. It took me to get them there now to realize what I should have been doing back then, right?
What were some of the tips to have for teenagers to be outdoors more?
Well, first of all, it starts early, right? And to get your kid to be an outdoor kid, if he's been living in a basement from the time he's 15 or whatever, is a real tough slug. But some of the simple things that we did is we just made it an effort on weekends to do simple things outdoors. We'd paint rocks, or we'd count bugs, or we would go to the local, you know, creek and get a bottle of water and bring it back and look under the microscope we got from Walmart for $10 or $15 and just see what was in there, you know. We'd put a camera on a bird's nest, or we would had some really rudimentary telescope stuff that we made so that you could watch the track of the moon, but all stuff that was super simple. You know what I mean? That just to get them outdoors, and those things evolved into more stuff, camping and fishing and hunting and all the things that I enjoy. But it started, like when you said something simple, that's where it started when they were young. We certainly gave them screen time. You know, they watch TV like a lot of little kids did. But we were adamant about getting them outdoors and doing some of those things. And one of the things I say right off in the beginning of the book, if you think you can just shove your kid outdoors these days and not do anything more, and that'll make them outdoors, you can't. It starts with the parents. Like, they have to be a willing participant, whether they like it or not.
And there's no other kids outdoors anymore. Like when I was a kid shoved out on the street, everybody was out on the street. Exactly. So there was ball hockey, or like you said, like someone captured some bugs in a jar, and everyone's mesmerized by this jar, and you're trying to put grass in there and see if the bug lives a day or 2 days or whatever. There's like fights breaking out that get people's attention. You're drinking from the garden hose. You're going to somebody lost their tennis ball on the school roof, so everyone's trying to figure out how to climb it. You know, like all those kinds of things. But there was, because the kids were around. But then organized sports got to such a level, I feel, that it became practice. Like if you were in any sort of, even the higher levels of house league hockey in Oakville, you're on the ice maybe 4 days. This is house league. 4 days a week.
Yes, my kids.
So and then if everybody's in those sports, which the majority of people in Mississauga and Oakville, where I was growing up, everybody had their kids in these things. The kids weren't on the streets anymore. They're either in dance or gymnastics or cheer or hockey or soccer, lacrosse, rugby, all organized. Right. And it kind of lost a little bit of just that free time, no?
I agree with that. So, but we might be talking about two little different. If you have kids that are that involved with all the things they're doing, they're probably not spending an excess amount of time on screens in a basement or some other things, right? And they're not lacking for going out and doing, if you will. Now, maybe specifically outdoor stuff they might be a little lacking in. But this is more for somebody who's living in an apartment building in Scarborough, and they're wondering, like, how the heck can I get my kids outside to do a few things? You know what I mean? And certainly inviting other kids as well is part of my whole plan in there, because of those very things. Is if you do those things, you'll find that you're one of the few, and it gives you a good opportunity to collect other kids to go do it.
Sure, that's fair.
You know, but my kids, you're right. I mean, we were so busy that I can't say we had a tremendous issue with too much screen time, although it did come up at times. But screen time was just one of the things. It was just more about outdoor time, right? If you can't get out and you can't figure out how to enjoy the wonders of living out, the outdoors more or less, it really worries me that it lessens its value so much, and that we're already in environmental issues. It can only get worse, So, any opportunity to get young people out indoors and involved in the world around them is a big win for me in my mind. So, I
wonder where this trend's headed. Yeah, like it's like that information is definitely needed. I wonder if the forces are so great. Like what happens here?
Well, I mean, the force of the internet and all the technology.
Well, just think about your life, like South Florida to where you are sitting today. Like Oakville, when you came to Canada, there was like probably nothing here.
Yeah.
So this was just a field.
Sure.
And now you're here, it's all built up. It's like, where are we headed with all this stuff? And that's like, I guess that's long for some younger people thinking about it. To me, the 80s just was like yesterday.
Yeah.
And for all of this to happen, so then if another, what is that, 10, 20, 30, 40 years to go by, another 40 years goes by, like what the heck, where are we with stuff now with AI and the screen time, like you're saying, and the way jobs are going to be set up? It's just interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot different world.
So when you were writing the book on what with some of the lessons you wish teenagers received, or your teenagers received that you wish you had taught them, were some like that really stood out for you? What were those? Like, was there a couple like, holy shit, like I really missed it with this one?
Yeah, one of them in particular I thought that I'd missed is when kids go to parties, when they start going to parties as parents, right? And most of them are drinking well before the drinking age, whether you want to admit it or not.
How dare you?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think if you're, and I'm not suggesting that we accepted or we allowed, but we acknowledge the fact that, that we had just the reality of it. But, there are lots of times, even in my childhood, and I think there's too, where they got caught in situations in a party where they were uncomfortable, but they didn't know how to get out of it. And whether it was drinking when they didn't want to, or riding when they didn't want to, or doing something else when they didn't want to. And I just wished that I had thought that through better, because I probably sent them into the fire about at times without a lot of direction. And I mean, just simple strategies: go with somebody else, have a plan to leave. If somebody's really pushing you for drinking, hey, I got to go to the bathroom and come back and then go stand somewhere else. You know what I mean? There's lots of ways to deflect and rearrange and all those things. I never taught my kids any of that, right? And that's just not the base. I mean, some silliness. Like, I don't know about your kids, but when my kids started driving, I'm not sure at that point I'd ever even told them how to check the air pressure in a tire, or how to check the oil, or any of those things, right? And nowadays, you break down on the edge of the road, particularly I have 3 girls, it's just not a good situation, right? So even the simplest things of, hey, this is what you do if something, and I'm not suggesting you crawl in the car and try to figure out what it is, but you have your Canadian Tire guy or your CAA card handy, and don't get out of the car. The basics. And do parents tell their kids that? I don't know. Some do, I'm sure, but I think a lot don't. I know I didn't do as good a job as I should have. And so those are a couple things, strategies. I just think the other thing I didn't really do as well, I mean, we had the talk, if you will, but your bodies at that teenage, they're going through all kinds of strangeness. We all know that. And I think kids sometimes, nobody talks to them like what's happening and, what are the ramifications, and hey, it's okay. Everybody else is going through the exact same thing. I never really had that much of that kind of conversation with them, or as much as now in hindsight, I wish I did. Right. So anyway, that's a few things. I mean, there's a bookload of stuff there, anywhere from, like I said, cooking healthy to car stuff, banking stuff, how to go to a resume, how do I dress, what do I say? Nobody ever told me that. I don't think I did a particularly good job of telling them, prepping them for those type of things, until they went through it once. And then I said, oh, wow, geez, we should have done this. We should have done. And I was like, well, I don't know why I didn't say that ahead of time, but I just didn't, So, again, lots of opportunity, I thought, to help if I could, now that I've been through it once or a few times with all 3 of them, where I missed the boat, and now maybe give somebody else a chance to have a look at, what I wish I had done back then. So. Yeah. Any
talk about, you've been involved in real estate, commercial and residential stuff. Any talk about assets or that kind of stuff, or do you,
with kids?
Well, I don't know now. Yeah. Now, do you talk about that with them?
Yeah. We talk a lot about the basics of savings and just in general, be smart with your money if you can. I haven't talked to them a lot about they hear me. Like, why is Bitcoin good or bad? Or
I can't believe. So you're into Bitcoin?
yeah, in a
This makes me happy, but I don't know what you're about to say next.
Well, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on Bitcoin alone, but I think I'm a kind of a Michael Saylor
Cool.
student, if you will.
Yeah.
And I really believe that it's an excellent opportunity for a storage of wealth. And I do believe, I like the fact that the government, keeps the government out, if you can, because I think that's the biggest problem we have right now is just government involved in everything and making bad decisions. Because anyway,
How dare you, Steve?
I know. But I found right now it's difficult, it's complicated to explain that to a kid, because I think a lot of Bitcoiners are not what I would consider using it for what it's really meant. They're using it as a trading vehicle, like you would trade IBM stocks or whatever else, And to me, like I was watching a podcast the other day, I was talking, well, we've reached a ceiling, and should we sell and when should we buy? And to me,
so they're traders.
They're traders, right? And that's exactly not, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not a Bitcoin expert, but that's not what I view it as. I view it as a place to store. And like Saylor, he's not selling anything. He just keeps accumulating, and that's what I see. I just, I someday you want it to have enough trade so that you can move out of it, and take advantage. But
you want to live.
You want to live.
Yes.
When you're 90 or 80 and you've got some resource there, you want to be able to access.
Or ideally next year and then 5 years, right? You want to live.
If you want to live. But I try not to use my live money in there. I try to use my, hey, I want this to be around as long as the family needs it type money. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so I try not to look at it as a trade if it goes up and down or all around. I just look at it. I guess to back where we started, though, is to explain that to a 21-year-old is difficult.
Tough.
They don't have enough experience in the economy. And quite frankly, I'm not even sure I understand it 100% all the time. I kind of, take my best whack at understanding what's going on. And like you, I see your Bitcoin, I read everything I can read.
Well, I think I've just been just straight brainwashing my children now for 4 years.
Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah. Have you? You're probably harder than me. Yeah. Harder
Yes,
than
I
me.
probably am.
Yeah.
Well, it's just because on the life lessons front, like I look at life, I recently saw this example. So I don't know, it's not my favorite, but the Monopoly board, it's kind of like, that's a little bit of life, right? Like most people play the game in the real world, like Monopoly, when you go past go and you get $200.
Right.
Except in the real world, when you get the $200, you're taxed. So you don't even get the $200.
Right.
And at least in Monopoly, the clear objective is to like buy some assets,
right?
Get utilities, a railroad, pick up some assets. There's expensive assets and cheaper assets and that kind of stuff. And the majority of the game, the majority of the board is like focused on that.
Right.
But in life, the focus is like going past go to collect your $200. And it's always just amazing to me that like in that game, it's very clear. The people who win the game financially typically manage their money and buy some assets.
Right.
And the ones who don't are stuck trying to just go past go desperately. Right. And in the real world, the vast majority of people are just trying to go past go. And then I'll take it a step further and I'll say, well, who's the real power on the board?
Right.
There's the banker who you don't even see on the board. The banker's on the side, and the banker just puts in money into the game as necessary, and the banker never runs out of money.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you want to try to figure out how that money system of the game works? So forget going past go. That's income. Almost forget about buying assets. It's important. It's a way to win the system and the way it is. But what the heck is going on with the banker? And I'm saying to people, anyone who will listen, that's the way the real world is as well.
Right.
The banks, you're in real estate, the banks win. So like if you can figure out this money game and at the source how it works, how they debase it, they devalue it, and if you could use something like Bitcoin to protect yourself and shield yourself from that, man, you can really set yourself up quite nicely within the rules of the game as they are.
I agree.
So, but it is a tough conversation.
It is a tough cut for them to understand. We talk a lot about that, the inflation and the government printing money and putting it in as fast as we can do it and some of those things. But again, I always get the feeling they're glazing over a little bit.
Sure, and that's fair. Yeah, I just feel like telling people straight up, you are getting robbed. Like what's happening is you're going to work every day, exchanging your time and labor for some money that the government is every day printing more of and debasing the purchasing power of the stuff that you are earning, and they're not telling you.
Yeah.
And it's a giant ripoff. And so I just want people to be aware of that. And if then they choose to ignore it, so be it.
So be it.
Steve. Now I'm going off on a tangent.
So to them, that end, though, I think the one thing that we spend a lot of time on with kids is maybe not so much the financial part of it, but we talk a lot of politics, and not so much who's the right guy or who's the wrong guy, but understanding that it's a right, and it's a super important right. And if you want to change things, that's where to change it. You can't blame the government all the time. The government is you, right? And if you want to change it, whether it's one vote or not, you've got to get it in your mindset that you've got to change. And you can't be voting for that guy because you like pink cats and he's willing to throw money at supporting pink cats. Like that's just not the right way it has to go, right? And we've talked a lot about I don't want to be a doomsdayer, but we're in a tough situation right now. And there's going to have to be, probably not in my lifetime, but soon, there's going to be some tough decisions that are either going to have to be made or decisions that are super unpopular, but they're going to happen, or we're going to have some kind of a major change, a major correction. And so we talk a lot about how to prepare for that, how to let the politics, your voice be heard out in the politics. You know what I mean? And I don't always agree with some of their stuff. They don't always agree with some of my stuff. But the thing is, I don't know how many kids are even talking about that. Like how many kids go to their dad and say, "Hey, Dad, who are you voting for?" And that's who they vote for because they have no. It's
interesting.
No clue,
I admire.
right?
Yeah, no, agreed. And I admire that you're doing that with your kids. I think I've come to the point where it's just all a distraction. Like it doesn't matter who you put into power until you remove the printing press from those in power. So, for example, who votes for war?
Yeah.
But there's always a new war.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which side of the politics gets in. And how are they able to fund a new war? It's that they can print money at will.
At will, yeah.
But if they had to go to the population and say, hey, listen, we need to raise your taxes or we need to issue war bonds to fund this war, at least then you get a vote from the population whether they're willing to fund that or not. Where any party can get into power. They can choose any war and say they're behind it, print the money to fund the war and proceed. So I really think until you move the money printer in the central banking system away from politics and you go back to a money system that can't be printed like that, it doesn't matter who you vote into power. Like if I look at the US, the Republicans and the Democrats add to the debt and do annual deficits, but pretty much similar rates.
Yeah.
So it's almost like democracy with a money printer behind it is just this perfect combo to produce this nasty environment eventually where you're just printing more money and you're funding things that are nonsensical and there's no end to it. Like I don't understand the natural end to this current system. And the reason it scares me is because I only see it getting worse before it gets better. Like I can't see who comes into power in the US or in Canada or anywhere in the West and says, hey, you know what, Steve? I know your area of Mississauga, or wherever you're living now, they need some new roads and new bridges and stuff, but we don't have the money right now, Steve.
Yeah.
Sorry. We just don't have the money. So we're going to have to either tax you more or we're just going to have to wait for that and we're going to have to save up the money.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to do that. They're just going to print more money, debase everyone's currency, and it just perpetuates forever until there's a loss of confidence in the very currency that they're printing, and then it's just ugly.
Yeah. Well, I don't disagree with anything you said, and it does scare me a little bit. The only answer I have, and I'm not even sure it's an answer, it's just a thought, is I'm hoping that someday that our kids or kids will have enough insight and there will be somebody that stands up and says, we got to shut the printer off, and they vote for that guy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they did in Argentina, but I feel like it took 80 years of debauchery for them to get there.
Yeah, and it may take 80, it may be our kids who are going to have to do it. But if they don't think about it, they don't understand it. If they just go along spending and consuming and they don't kind of let this stuff go off and hopefully it figures itself out somewhere, I think that's a problem. At least at the very least, my kids will know what's happening to them if they're out of control.
Which is half the battle.
Well, yeah, they got to know at least what's going on, I think. And you know, whether they can actually ever make a dent in it or not, I'm not sure. But that's no reason not to try. But I do.
Sometimes I wonder if in our lifetimes we'll see the end of the modern nation state. Like the nation states, the way they are laid out right now, like they're kind of like it's not the longest history in the world. The way everything's laid out globally right now is like it has 100-year history or so, maybe a little bit more. But after each of the world wars, there was borders redrawn and changed. I wonder if we are going to be alive in a time where we legitimately see some massive change to large nation states, and we go back to these city states that are smaller. They attract capital because maybe they treat taxes differently.
Right.
And I know that sounds just absolutely crazy. Like for my generation to talk like this, like when we were born talking about countries, and it seems very strange. But if you look throughout history, the way we are mapped out on this rock that's floating around space right now, it doesn't have that much history. So I wonder if there are some great changes ahead that we just almost can't even see yet.
I think there are. Personally, I think that I'm with you. I think it's not that. It probably is not in my lifetime. I'm not even sure it'll be in your lifetime. But I do think with
Steve, we're both going to be here for it.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you. Knock on wood, right? But I do think with all the communication that goes on now, the world is becoming a smaller and smaller place. I mean, I got a kid that's roaming around Australia right now, my eldest. I talk to her every day on WhatsApp. Like, it's just amazing, you know? And
Carol's here. Sorry. Yeah.
It's just amazing. And I just think that opens up the whole world. You know what I mean? It's becoming smaller. And so I could see a time where we're so intermingled, and kind of the old guard in some of these states, China or Russia or even the US, are going to pass. It's going to be our kids, and they're going to look at each other like we're just one big group.
Yeah, like, are we jurisdictionally independent? Like, why do we need to be like locked into these nation states like the way we are? I've been thinking about that a lot recently. It's like, I think that generation, the younger generation, they just want more freedom to be around. It's like, why are you going to lock me into these borders of Canada and say I pay taxes here and I do this? I'd like to be able to spend some of my time in this part of the world, some of my time here. And I think they would like to contribute. I think everybody just generally would like to contribute.
I agree.
So everyone will pay the taxes that they are owed to pay.
Yeah.
I don't think there's fear of that. I just think that when people see it in one system and they feel closed in, and then the taxes aren't doing what they're said to be doing, it gets a little wonky. And you could almost feel it crumbling or shaking. Like there's something I've never felt before.
Yeah.
And some of my friends will say it's your age, Tom. Like you've never had this much perspective on the world. But I do think that like when we grew up in like I'm born in the 70s, and then to go through some very formative years in the 80s and even early 90s, I never, ever entertained, and no one around me entertained, that like Canada may not exist as the way it exists today.
Right.
At some point in the near future.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, the probabilities may be low.
Yeah.
But I can see it's not zero. Like I could see there could be a change. And that's like a big deal.
Yeah.
It changes your whole global worldview.
Does there really need to be a border between Canada and the U.S.? I don't know.
And do we need to use different current? Like somebody in Buffalo who's so close to us does the same job as a landscaper in Niagara, but they're earning two different currencies.
Yeah, it
doesn't really make sense anymore, does it?
Even in Mexico, I mean, you've got people reaming across the borders there. So what if there is no border and we all just intermingle, you know, as North America, as opposed to three different countries? Does it all balance out at some point? I don't know.
And then if you do that, I genuinely think you could have areas of geography that are smaller where different people with different interests maybe gravitate to. Like maybe there's some creative, I think right now in Austin, Texas, I always hear Joe Rogan talk about how all the comics are going there. Yeah. It's become a very creative area. I feel like there could be different cities that just attract different types of people who are willing to pay the taxes in those areas to support what is important to them. Yeah. And that seems like normal.
I couldn't agree more. I think there'll always be that kind of, you know, peer group coming together. You know, if you're a hillbilly in Montana or in Alabama, your group's going to be in one spot versus, you know, somebody in San Francisco, I think. You know what I mean? But the ability to just move around amongst, you know, all the countries. I mean, we came back from Europe. I've never spent a lot of time over there, but I wonder sometimes, like, why do they even have the borders between some, you know, you can drive 45 minutes from Salzburg in any direction. You're in a different country, you know, and it just seems like such a natural there to just dissolve all that stuff. And
well, I think the history there's been tribes of different people that have got along and hated each other at different points in history.
Isn't that a problem? Isn't that absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
But it is, I didn't know you hadn't spent time in Europe. I love it.
I had not until.
So where did you go?
Well, we went to my first time in Europe was this summer. We went on one of those Viking cruises. We went down the Danube.
How was that?
It was great. A little bit more organized than I would probably prefer.
Okay.
But being my first time, I was more than happy to be towed along. You know what I mean? Now I would much rather just go someplace and wander around at my own pace. But we covered a lot of the Vienna and Budapest and a bunch of German cities and then when we stayed in Salzburg for some time watching Cape, but we drove to Venice and we drove to different places and looked around and that kind of thing. So, but it was all new to me. And so I super enjoyed it. It's tight there. That's the one thing everybody asked me, how do you like it? I said, well, it's tight there.
For an American group in upper New York.
It's tight.
Yeah. New York, going to Florida, coming to Toronto. Yeah. Tight.
Everything's tight. Like I said, the streets are tight, the shops are tight, the apartments everything's tight. Yeah. So, but anyway, that's fine. But before we leave that time, I'm just going to say the one thing that I have spent a lot of time on with my kids, I think, or we talk about it a lot, and even Joanne to some extent, is trying to live a little bit simpler life. And I told them, don't use me as the example. I am the worst, right? Because one of the reasons I went into real estate, because I just wanted. I wanted. I was like my dad used to say, you're a collector, right? You collect cars or boats or planes. You collect, and then once you got what you want, you can't stop. Now you're collecting the next thing, right? And it really struck home to me when we were in Europe, because I was wandering around downtown Salzburg one day, and I went into this real estate shop, and the girl spoke English, and we were chatting, and she kept telling me about this house that was near Kate's rink, right? She couldn't stop talking about it. I think she thought we were going to move there or something, right? But the thing that struck me is she kept talking about, she said, it has a garage. Like, I'm not kidding. It has a garage, right? And she said, it's 1,800 square feet. Like, not just, it's 1,800 square feet, right? And I'm kind of smirking to myself, and I'm like, oh my God, like that's, if you told somebody you lived in 1,800 square feet in Mississauga, they'd be going, what is that, a townhouse? Or is that an apartment? But
not the biggest house in the area.
That's exactly right. She was so proud. The 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,800 square feet. And it just struck, I told the girl, same thing. I said, here we are, and we're living in this monstrosity of a house, which I built myself, so nobody to blame. But we could have done with half of that and done so much more stuff. You know what I mean? I just wish that I would have realized that at a much earlier age, to not get so tied up with collecting and spend more time on enjoying and doing, right? And, I say this, and I was doing a little speaking engagement at one of the small businesses there in Mississauga not too long ago. And I said to them, look, I get it. When I came up, I had a Lexus, for a while, whatever else. And now I look back at it and I think, how many hours did I have to work to afford that car versus if I would have been willing to drive the same, Chrysler minivan that I've been driving for 10 years now, right? And the reality is significant, So everything has a cost. And yeah, do I like to have nice stuff? Yeah, I do. But in hindsight, maybe I could have took that time and took my kids fishing, or took them to a game, or the whole family did something indifferent. And it's the same thing. We live in this big monstrosity of a home. I'm like, I can't imagine what the taxes you pay in Oakville are, but I'm sure they're similar to ours. I think the taxes for these big homes and stuff, and I just think we could easily do with so much less. And I just think as a principle along, everybody could live a little bit simpler life, and we'd be just a lot better. We'd have a lot more time for parenting, for one thing. We wouldn't need nannies and all the things, because, we're working that extra 20 hours to afford the Mercedes instead of the whatever. And now we got to have a nanny to raise our kids because we need that extra time, right? Or we need more money because we're living in 4,000 feet in Lorne Park someplace, when we could be living in 1,800 feet or 2,000 in Guelph or something. I don't know what the perfect example is, but I just think there's so many ways we could live a simpler life, and we'd be a happier for it, and we'd have more time. And I think if everybody did that, we'd find ourselves in a lot better environment than we are now, instead of this huge of consuming at all cost type of thing. I mean, the dollar stores drive me crazy. I just look at it, and every time I walk in there, I think, all this is going to end up in the ocean somewhere at some point in the not too far future, And so as kids, my kids, we talk about that a lot. I said, Kate or Jackie or Maddie, they want this. And I said, you know what, you could get that, but think if you got this, what you could do with the other money. You could buy an asset. Maybe you take a trip. Maybe you do something else you want. But I just don't think.
So basically we have to find who came up with the concept of suburbs and go back in time and just destroy that whole idea. Because when you go to Europe, half of it is just that they're all built on top of each other. These little 4-story kind of loft things. They're tiny. Nobody wants to stay in there. So then the social stuff moves to the streets.
Yeah.
Like the family room moves to the street.
Yeah.
Where you have the breakfast hub and the cafes and the restaurants and everywhere and the square.
Yeah.
So everyone's like all the social things that in suburbia were created within the house.
Yeah.
They're gargantuan house.
Yeah.
We're talking about.
Yeah.
That actually was a social thing on the streets, and they had small places to live, and you would go outside, to your point, and you would go hang out with people, and it was kind of healthy. Whereas suburbia created this monster where everybody created their town square as their family room in their house.
Yeah. I agree.
And it just kind of like it brought it inside.
Yeah.
Instead of like putting it outside. And then and it's interesting when I hear you say that, what comes to mind for me is that we went through this period where our parents or my parents' generation grew up through the 70s and 80s when interest rates were high. So they were like, debt is bad. Debt is bad. And then the last 20 years until about 2 years ago, the last 20 years was, no, debt's good. Like if you can use debt smartly, you can propel yourself forward financially.
Right.
And now I find myself at this point going, well, just be careful with this debt. Like you're going through these cycles of time where it's like, wow, we're going to tell our kids that you don't need the big house. And I can also hear myself, and I haven't really said this yet, but I could see myself saying to my kids, I guess I have said it, that debt's bad. So that's me going back to like my parents' generation said that, right? Like we're going through this like cycle of things all at the same time. It's kind of wild. Sorry, I'm all over the place.
Well, no,
you're making me think.
I think the message for us, for me and the girls, has always been less is not necessarily bad, right? Mm-hmm. Less is, we have kind of a little bit of a family saying less, maybe not bad. And the other thing is quiet is not bad, right?
How did that come up?
My dad, again, kids and us are talking all the time, but my dad was a big storyteller and he always had a lot of messages. And unfortunately, I was 50 before I really could appreciate. I'm going to write a book on that one day of all the stuff that he kind of verbalized in stories and I never really registered. But one thing he used to say to me when we were out hunting or fishing or whatever, he'd say, quiet's not so bad. And I used to think he was referring to just scaring the fish away or whatever else, And I never really paid attention until I was playing some higher level sports. And when I would get situations, and my dad would say to me, quiet's not so bad. And I know you're a Ryan Holiday guy, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's got a book on quiet, just quiet the mind, quieting everything. And we talk a little bit about that with kids as well, as less is not bad and quiet is not. You don't have to be talking all the time. You don't have to say, even if you have opinion, you don't necessarily need to voice it all the time. Just taking time to be quiet, whether it's riding in a car or doing what we're doing, you don't need to be sitting in your phone all the time because your mind needs a stimulation. Quiet's not necessarily bad, right? And so anyway, that's another thing we talk about. Less is good and quiet is not so bad.
It's amazing. What are you taking away from writing books? You like this time to yourself to think and get your thoughts.
It, Tommy.
So you're just really appreciating the ability to put thoughts on paper, reflect on them.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, so I'm 65 now. I just turned 65 the other day. Thank you. So I'm like most people. I realize there's more days behind than there are ahead.
Mike likes to tell me we're on the lap back. Yeah. Right when I turned 50, he goes, "Listen, it's official now. You're
on the back. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when you said time flies at 65, I know my mom at 94 was saying, "Steve, you think it passes quick at 60? You can imagine how fast it passes at 90, right?" But there's a couple things. One thing is I mentioned to me, I felt like in my really productive years, I was way too much of a taker and not enough of a giver.
Oh, really?
And I'm not sure where. I mean, maybe I became more of a reader and an appreciator of things that go around me in the world. But I started, probably 10 or 15 years ago, really thinking about how can I swap that around? Because my dad used to say the same thing. He used to say,
since I've known you, I wouldn't say that about you.
Yeah, maybe it's my own perception, but I think, well, we've probably known each other 15 years now. It's probably been about the time frame of that. But he used to tell me all the time, if you can find a way to spend more time giving, the money or the things that you want back will come tenfold, right? I don't think I paid very much attention to that when I was, in the peak of my real estate business. All I was doing was, I didn't care about anything. I just wanted the next deal where I'm hunting and killing as fast as I can hunt and kill, right? And I did a lot of taking. I don't think I did any giving back. So now maybe this is a traditional thing for older people. And, as you go back and look at where you were, I just thought, well, I've got now 65 years of school of hard knocks, and I went through a lot of interesting things and kids and moving and countries and politics and finance and the whole thing. And maybe there's an avenue to give some of that back. Into the system, if you will. And so that's what started the writing. And I do kind of enjoy it. I mean, I was getting up in the morning. I think you and I talked about, so you're kind of meditating and do some stuff in the morning. I find now it's a lot easier for me. I'll read something. I'm a big reader. So I'll take 25 minutes or 15 minutes or how much ever time I think I can spend, and I'll read. And then I force myself, but I take the other time and I sit down with a pencil and sometimes I just yammer away in my own thing. I'm kind of like a Marcus Aurelius. I'll journal to myself sometimes for nobody to see. But sometimes I'll write something. I'll thought, there's a book I wouldn't mind having a whack at, or something like that, right? And it really gives you an opportunity to get back, kind of like this commercial real estate thing we're talking about. I mean, I got all this knowledge now, and I find it difficult to give it back, except in small spurts. You know what I mean? Like if somebody phones me up and says, can I help you? Sure. But I kept thinking about, well, how can I bring that value to a broader
Yeah.
reach?
So for everyone listening, Steve's going to teach a course on commercial leases.
Right.
And that is probably the most interesting information that I've ever received. When we signed our first commercial lease, you helped us through it. And I think most people just sign on the dotted line. And then you realize when the lease comes up, how you screwed yourself so badly, because all the clauses in there that don't allow you to extend and don't allow you to change the square footage, or just what you taught us about measuring the square footage of your lease. And I think our lease was off by like 50 or 100 square feet, which I guess isn't that much, but to us it was like
$5,000 over 5 years or something like
huge.
that. Right?
Yeah, it was huge, and all these little things, and so I was just blown away. And it's like we all have these treasure troves of information kind of hidden in us, and that's one of yours for sure. So I know you're going to teach this class, and we're actually going to. I think Nigel on the team is hitting you up to do like a 1 hour kind of mini version of the class, even. So we're excited that you're doing that. So thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to that. For sure.
And anyone listening, do you still consult on commercial leases?
Yeah, all the time.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing one with Ruben right now, actually.
Okay, so anyone listening, if you're going through a business and your commercial lease that you need reviewed, whatever, I don't know your current fees for this stuff. I will just tell you from experience, Steve is the man. You want to talk to Steve before signing on the dotted line with a commercial lease. Oh. It is like incredible. I had no idea. And I'm convinced 90% of people just close their eyes, pray, because everyone's under pressure. Well, you need a place for your business. You got to act fast. You might lose it if you don't sign. Yeah. You close your eyes, you take a deep breath, and you sign. Yeah. You just pray that you did the right thing.
Yeah, they're 80 pages long now, right? I mean, when I started, it was 30. Now they're 80.
And then you gave us that beautiful binder with the
with
lease.
All the abstract.
You broke it all out. Like you were just like, I didn't know somebody could be born to handle commercial leases, but you were clearly born to handle commercial leases.
Well, and it's so simple, but it could be. I mean, a lot of people spend 20-30% of their business or more on their premises, right? And there's so many things in there. Where,
the utilities, the common space.
Nobody monitors.
You told us to check. I think you told us to check the common space square footage or something. I forget. Well, and like everything you were telling us was like, holy shit, it's wrong. Yeah. Holy shit, this is wrong. It's like somebody just, I don't know if they were intentionally trying to screw us. I think it was more just someone took some measurements. No one bothered to check.
And they change over time, and people come and go. And this is a classic one I see all the time. People, they get their monthly utilities, their add-ons or additional rent bill. Nobody ever checks them. like there's, you have every right to check them every year if you want. And some of them are capped. Like I think we capped yours at like 3% a year or something.
Capped it, thankfully. And then I think Nick checked and it was still off or something.
Yeah,
some
like
HVAC guys
nobody checks, anything. They throw it in a drawer.
You don't even know what to check. Like if you sign a commercial lease, it's usually going to be 5 years.
5 years, yeah, generally.
10 years sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, how often are you going to do that in life?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's all kinds of stuff in there that...
and you know how these commercial real estate people are, Steve.
They're horrible.
They're horrible. So no, it's cool that you're doing that. I didn't know you were still consulting on those. So that's great.
Yeah.
So, you were joking about your age there, but realistically, you're going another 30 years. So you have 3 decades. So I just want for perspective here. No, for perspective, if the first 25 years of your life, let's face it, you're pretty clueless, especially as a guy.
Yeah.
I think maybe women get sorted out a little sooner.
Yeah.
But guys, until they're like, I feel like 25, 26, let's face it, don't know what's going on.
Yeah. They're thinking with the wrong head, basically.
Yeah, it's a disaster on any levels.
Yeah.
So then, so I'm 50 now, so it really means half my life I didn't know what was going on. And that's it. So if I live another 40 years, I'm living more of the interesting years of my life are still ahead.
Right.
So what I'm trying to tell you is that your body, as long as you take care of your physical meat, your physical form, you got a lot of good years ahead.
Yeah.
And the impact that you can have on people with these books and your message and the commercial lease stuff and the real estate analysis stuff, Steve, you got a lot of good times ahead. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I hope so.
I hope so. I hope so too. I think it's going to happen. Like you're on the lap back, but it's a long
lap. Yeah, we'll make it as long as we possibly can, right?
So we covered a bunch of stuff here, but I want to make sure, did we touch on most of the points you wanted to talk about here?
Yeah, I think so. We talked. I guess we really didn't talk about the real estate market at all, but we talked about kids. That's what I really.
What are you seeing in the real estate market?
Yeah, so I kind of got out of the. I was doing a fair bit of building in.
Was it St.
Catharines? Yeah, and COVID hit us hard, and talk about again. Maybe not preparing well or not misjudging where I thought it was going. And it really stung. Talking about having money set aside for a rainy day. It was a perfect level because I had some, but not enough to cover that kind of stinging. Right. And so I kind of got out of that for the moment. My lender stepped aside as well. And it stung so bad. I thought I need a breath from that, for a while. Right. But I think there's always opportunity in any market. You just have to be astute and you have to watch what's going on. And sometimes you have to realize that no matter how astute or how watch you get, you could I don't think anybody could predict that interest rates were going to go up 9 times in 8 months. You know what I mean? Or whatever, 8 times in 7 months, whatever it was.
To be fair, I think the Bank of Nova Scotia actually did. Yeah. Because I remember seeing the report going, there's no way that's happening.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, listen, that's funny.
Yeah.
Please make me laugh.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that business, I think that kind of what I was doing, buying and selling for profit is a tough one to be involved right now, I think. But the industrial business continues to flourish, which tells me that there's small businesses out there going at it.
Oh, really? Industrial space is still in
is at a premium.
Always just been a shortage here?
Yeah, most of the time. We've never had, in 89, we had a blip there where the vacancies were up. But the oddity is, I'll bet you for the first 25 years, industrial rates didn't go up more than a couple bucks. When I came here, it was $350, and up till 6-7 years ago, you could still go get industrial space for $450, $550, $650 or something like that. Now industrial space like $1,750. You know what I mean? Wow. It's amazing to me how
is that just sheer population growth? So there's more demand for storing goods to sell to the population.
It is a combination of land costs have skyrocketed, so guys can't build and make it work unless they're getting those high rates. And I thought, well, there's no way that guys, businesses can pay that, but they are. So that tells me that their businesses are still doing, some businesses are doing well. The warehousing business is big. Obviously, there's so much packaging stuff traveling around these days and that kind of thing. And we continue to consume at unheard of rates. So, manufacturing storage. Like we're not manufacturing here much, but the storage of it once it comes is a thing. And certainly retail's constantly evolving. The thing that's happening now I see is retail's moving to some extent, again, I think to cut costs, is you'll now find the industrial multiple and they're selling retail on the front of it. You know what I mean? Rather than a traditional, hey, this is a shop in a mall or something like that, or in a plaza. That guy finds that he can sell pizzas out of the front of an industrial building as long as he fits the zoning and some of those things. So that retail market is constantly changing. I think it's tough to keep up with it and understand it. I'm not far from an expert on retail, but that's my perception. But as we continue to consume at the rate that we're consuming, there's always going to be the need to buy it. And whether it's buy on Amazon and have it shipped to you, or buy somewhere else and it comes to you.
So maybe it's just retail shifting into industrial because everyone's buying online.
There you go.
So it could be just that
that's
shift.
That's exactly what's happening. There's a shift. But boy, I'll tell you, you go over here in the Winston Business Park and a nice industrial unit, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 feet, you're going to pay 17, 18. You're going to pay more for that now than for office space.
Well, I know a bunch of the CrossFit gyms in that area had to leave because
couldn't keep.
The landlord just jacked the rent, and what we were hearing is that the ceilings were high. So if you're storing goods,
it's worth it.
It's worth it because you can store so high, you don't actually even need a big footprint.
Right.
So then the landlords were saying, if there's this much demand, I can raise the price. Even though my footprint is small, they're still going to pay for it.
Right.
But then you get businesses like a CrossFit gym that really can't afford
do it.
to do that, and they're swept away.
Yeah.
So
same thing with office. It's changing so drastically. Right. I'm doing an office deal right now with one of your guys, and quite frankly, our lease is significantly below what it would cost for that space in an industrial unit. The industrial unit is way more than what we're paying for it in an office, right? Which is hard to imagine, but the office business has changed so much now. I mean, you go down through like job search sites and everything says remote.
I know
remote.
The people I know working downtown Toronto are trying to. They're back now Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah,
but they're still not back 5 days.
No,
Monday and Friday is like optional or whatever. Yeah. So I just think on office renewals as a company, why like downtown? Why are you going to renew all the space? Like when we got this space, we're in just over 4,000 square feet here,
right.
And we have the big part of it is the classroom, which we still use, but we used to use that in person 2 to 3 times a week. But now we're still doing 2 to 3 times a week classes here at Rockstar, but not more than, but at least half of them are virtual.
Yeah.
So we bought this place for enough square footage for the class.
Yeah.
And we use it now for team meetings. It has become handy for sure, but it's square footage that we probably wouldn't account for if we were going to get another office.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. It's changed.
It's changed. And I don't think it's going to, I've heard some people say, it's eventually going to change. I don't think it is. If they tear up the Gardner like they're talking about now, are you going to be commuting downtown all the time through that? Like, I just can't.
But then suburbia changes because do you have to live in Oakville? Because you don't need to be close to downtown. Like, you can go anywhere you want.
You can live in Georgetown.
You live in a different time zone.
Yeah, of course.
And this is where going back to our talk on jurisdictions.
Of course.
I mean, you could be in Austria.
Yeah.
If you really want, as long as you're meeting the deadlines.
And you're Zoom calling. And
like as an employer, if someone's just getting the job done.
Couldn't agree more.
The flip to that is when we were totally remote, we noticed a change in productivity.
Yeah.
So we did notice a change in the amount of stuff getting done did decrease.
Yeah.
And I think part of that's just natural. You're at home, schedule's different, the communication's not, even though you're on chat, it's not quite as good.
Right.
So I just wonder if there's going to be a competitive advantage to businesses that are smaller, but get people to come in, but are in communities where everyone can live locally, and not have these long commutes.
I do think
there's going to be it's just a changing atmosphere. It's like almost maybe Toronto or big cities dissolve into smaller little things.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's what's good. And I think the new challenge, years ago, not that long ago, but certainly when I was coming up through the business, there was a big change now is you were all the especially the architects and the those type of groups were going through great extents to keep employees by creating play areas, pool tables, ping pong tables, all that kind of stuff. Right? It was a real atmosphere change. And now I think the challenge is going to be is if you're a company and you've got people working at home, how do you arm them or how do you create an environment where they can be as productive as you need them to be or you want them to be, right? again, I guess kind of goes back a little bit. Maybe a little bit less is not so bad. You know what I mean? I know as much stuff wasn't being done, but maybe there's some other benefits. People at home.
Yeah, there could just be a change of yeah.
Well, how about just more parenting time? Right?
Yes.
How about more parenting time? That's the biggest. I mean, I keep harping on this stuff, I know, but you want to change racism, you want to change, wars and everything else. You start getting kids when they're 3 years old and start teaching them, the value of human life, the no difference. I mean, you look at, I don't want to get too political, but you look at Palestine and Israel. None of those kids are born hating each other. They're but you listen to your parents or people around you tell you got to hate that guy over there for the next 20 years. You're going to hate him, right? And until we start grabbing kids at these young ages and really parenting them like they should be parented, in my mind, it's going to be tough to change those things. You can't take a guy who's racist at 40 or 50 years old, throw him in jail and think that's going to change it for him now. It just doesn't work that way, right? I don't think. You got to be in the schools or in parenting early on and working with kids to, with those kind of...
and this is where I go back where people think I'm absolutely ridiculous. It's like broken money, broken world to me, because when you can't get ahead financially and then you have multiple parents who need to go out to work to support the family because of the loss of purchasing power of the dollars that are being earned, you break the family unit.
Yeah,
I think the family unit is very valuable because... You're right. Those are the conversations that you hear every day. That's where the knowledge is being passed down. That's where things are checked before they get out of control. And I think, unfortunately, it just sounds ridiculous, but it's also so simple. If we can fix the money, and I know this is like a Bitcoiner term and people will disagree with this, but I don't disagree. Like if you fix the money, you can fix the world. The money is broken, and it's the political system that we can all have a better political system. Maybe democracy has to be reset every once in a while when regulations get so thick that nobody knows how to put up a building without going through a bunch of approvals anymore. But, so we can debate the politics side of it. But when you have unlimited money printing to anyone in power, it just creates an environment where there's no controls. It's just whoever's in power can print money to do whatever they want. They can run deficits forever. They can say whatever they want to get elected.
Right.
And it doesn't matter, because then when they're in power, they can print the money to do whatever it is they please, and there's no vote necessary. There's no vote necessary to print unlimited dollars. Like when any government gets into power in Canada or the US and decides we need to fund this, everybody then cheers. Yeah, they don't have to go to their population base that votes for them and say, we're going to tax you to do what we all just cheered for.
Right.
They just print the money. Right. If we remove that from people, from politicians, at least now we have a system that has boundaries set up where it's like, oh my gosh, we can't do these things. We don't have any more money.
Right.
How are we going to fix that? Do we want to save? Do we want to tax? But we don't have those conversations. There's no conversations in politics anymore around, I think we have to save up for that.
Right.
Imagine we needed a new hospital in Oakville and someone said, well, we need to save for that. People would think you're crazy. Yeah. What do you mean?
What do you mean?
We can't wait for that. Just do it.
Yeah.
But then you print more money to do it. It devalues everyone's purchasing power and no one understands why they have to get ahead. And then multiple people have to go to work to support their families. The family unit dissolves and we get a society that's kind of all broken. I know this sounds crazy, Steve,
No, I don't think
there's some truth here.
Well, no, there's absolutely truth there. It's funny. We were just having this discussion with my kids the other day about the capital gains check that's changing, right? And I said, as much as I hate that, and I think it's just, again, it's just the government, we're so far in debt, we got to grab money wherever we can. But I said to them, if you're going to take that money, at the same time, in the same breath, you better be telling me how you're cost cutting somewhere else. You know what I mean? But nobody ever talks about cost cutting. All we talk is about how we can tax more, get more income by taxing, but nobody talks about cost cutting at all. I just want to get back to one thing, and I know we're probably going long here, but you said a key word to me, and I think about it all the time, and I preach it a lot, is the family unit. It's so important. And I can't help but think, I think all the things you're saying are absolutely right, but I can't help but wonder if we had kids young and we started, trying to work them through the process. Hey, you don't need to live in 4,000 feet. You don't need to drive a Lexus. You don't need these things. You can live a great life with great stuff, but much lesser. If we had a whole country that was preaching that and doing that, would we even need to worry about printing more money anymore? You know what I mean?
Agreed.
I don't know, but I just...
Well, agreed, but we can't have that conversation, Steve, because both parents are working.
That's the problem, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, man, this is fix the money. Like, we have to suffer a little bit. Nick makes fun of me because he says I like to say this word too much, but I'm like, there needs to be suffering.
Yeah.
Like when you're a hockey guy, so like you don't get the skills to like put a puck in the top corner unless you suffer through 1,000 drills of trying to do that.
Yep.
And we've created a society where there's never any suffering.
Yeah.
There's no suffering allowed, and there's no financial suffering ever discussed.
Yeah.
Whereas I want there to be some financial suffering at the population. And listen, I will fund hospitals. Like I want universal healthcare. I'm for it. But we can't have everything.
Yeah.
Let's decide we can't do some weird project somewhere.
Yeah.
Like you said, where are we reducing something?
Something somewhere. Yeah. Or let's put a whole list out and here's the 10 things we can and here's the 10 things we can't. You know what I mean? You know, funny you saying that, but to hear you talk, I'm a Jordan Peterson fan as well. And one of the things he preaches a lot is particularly in universities, but I think it's across the board now, is we've protected our kids so much from everything that they don't have any idea what they can overcome. The pain you talk about.
There's no suffering allowed.
There's no suffering allowed. Yeah. That's right. You if somebody says something racist to you, how do I deal with it? They don't even have to deal with it. You got 10 other people saying, "Oh, that guy's whatever," and you never have to deal with anything. He talks constantly about how universities now become just a big makeover, right? That kids are not forced or required to do anything, and as soon as they show any kind of a problem, there's 50 other people out there to tell them they should do this or go that way or protect them from whatever's happening. And I agree 100%. How can there be any pain or working through, or the old adage of you are what you overcome, if you never have to overcome everything, because we've got 20 programs in place to somehow save you from all that.
It's funny you say that. Just at my daughter's high school graduation, and one of the dads came up to me afterwards and said, "Tom, did you notice that like 85% of the graduates graduated with honors?" When I was in high school, I don't even know what it means anymore. I think that means 80% or higher. But when I was in high school, it was not 85% of the graduating class graduating with honors.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice. Like, I heard it, but I wasn't really cluing in. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, it was like 85%. I'm like, you know what? That sounds about right. Where in my high school, it was like, I think it felt like it was, if I had to pick a number, it'd be like 30% graduating, with honors, maybe 50%.
I don't think,
No,
for me, it wasn't even that high.
No,
right?
and not 85.
Yeah, for sure.
But the anomaly was the kids that weren't, didn't have honors after they said they're graduating.
Yeah.
And I thought that's so kind of just a sign of our time.
It is. Yeah. Well, my wife, she's a teacher, right? Or she's retired. She just retired. But oh my God, the stories come, like, you can't fail anybody. You can't do anything. I mean, she had a kid that didn't do anything all year, never even came to class. And then her parents showed up at the end and said, well, what are we going to do? And the principal is trying to pressure Joanne to say, well, give her a couple of tests and let's get her through this. And Joanne said, forget it. I'm not doing that, right? You can give it to her if you want, but the kid did absolutely nothing. We're not going to give her a grade to pass her through. But the other thing, Tom, you're just talking about general and parenting is, she had time she's been substituting, and she had a fourth grader there the other day just telling her to off.
Oh,
you know
really?
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I can tell you that's parenting, pal. That's not coming from, that comes from home, right? And that's a real problem for
Steve, we need these
days.
books.
Yeah.
We need to, you're going to have to start helicoptering. You're going to have to get a helicopter and start just spraying them over the city for everybody to read.
Oh my God. Well, I feel sorry for teachers these days, man.
Give us the names. Can you remember the names of your books as we wrap up here? Give us the names of your books.
Yeah. So the one is Raising Outdoor Kids. That's out there today. Better Investment Decisions. That's the due diligence book. And the next one coming is Teenager's Guide to Life. So,
Steve DeVoe.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. We'll link to the books in the show notes of this episode, and I really appreciate you doing this. You didn't have to come on and do this.
Oh, it was great, Tom. You and I hadn't talked in a long time, and I always
appreciate it.
I always enjoy getting after it. So that's good. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.